Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Heretic Gamer Podcast. I am your host, Marshall, and this is my co-host, Dylan.
Hello, hello.
And, today I thought would be a great day. I mean, we can, with its recent release, and definitely not an excuse for me to play Space Marine 2 and level this up for B-roll. I thought today would be a great day and a fun time to talk about some of, honestly, people's more well-liked Mechanicus-esque characters in 40K in the Techmarine, seen here by this sick model.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wait, that was a little... Sorry. Here we go.
I can see it. There we go. Oh, wow, yeah. The Techmarine.
Here's a bigger one that you can see the old one a little bit clearer with the old one with his big wrench.
I gotta be real. I kind of love the old one.
Oh, I mean, it's such a like a character.
The helmet is iconic.
Well, the beaky helmet is always going to be iconic. Like there are people who don't like it. I think one of the things personally is definitely
they're fools. We know this.
I think people who don't like the old beaky helmet, I think one of the things that actually turns them off is kind of the mono visor that it has.
Okay.
But that being said, I agree they're wrong and we'll move on. But we do have a newer Techmarine model, which you also can see there. But yes, today I thought it'd be fun to talk about the Techmarines because, while in general sharing some personality with the Adeptus Mechanicus counterparts, Techmarines do have to find themselves kind of in a middle ground. Like they live kind of a dual life, if you will, because they have different brothers around them. They are within the Space Marines and all the other Astartes around them. They have to fit in and, work with them. They're not with the Mechanicus all the time. And thus that aspect of brothers, but different, does kind of lead to a sad reality of the Techmarine, or otherwise known as the Frater Astrotechnicus.
Frater Astrotechnicus.
Yeah, like frater, like FAR or FRATER, so frat.
Like fraternity.
Yeah. Good old Latin words in GW. Never gets old.
Are they still worshiping the Omnissiah, or is that made more complicated by them being Marines?
A little both, but yes. Let's talk about kind of not the origins of the Techmarine, though we somewhat, but also kind of how does one become a Techmarine?
I bet it's really easy and pain-free.
Well, the first step is to become a Space Marine, which already loses that one. Which we do. That is a process we do need to talk about a bit at some point, which is kind of like the process and the anatomy of becoming a Space Marine. Honestly, I would have done that today had I at any point in the process of this realized, wait, we never did that episode until right now. So, and we're not pivoting now because I'm not ready for it.
Nope.
So this is a good time to kind of reiterate the Treaty of Olympus Mons. The Emperor made his way to Mars, and instead of just outright conquering them, the Emperor saw the value in not going into open conflict. I am in the camp. There are many who think that the Emperor would have struggled to take Mars, in combat because of obviously their technological might. I would make the argument that I think that the emperor very well could have. It's not like there was no technology on Terra during the Unification Wars era in the Old Night. It's just all of that technology was owned by the barbarian leaders, like all these kings and warlords and all that, you know. That's why they were called techno barbarians, right?
Sure. Okay.
But again, still there is no arguing that the emperor having just conquered Terra was going to, there's no argument that it would have been a long drawn out process to defeat the Mechanicum on Mars, right? Because they still did have a lot of technology and, they were heavily set in that. So it was through then going through this treaty that, there were many in the Mechanicum who saw the emperor as an Omnissiah for the machine god. But through this treaty, we're given a relative freedom, but also then had to provide tech and support throughout the Great Crusade, right? They could do what they want. They had some, I would say most autonomy. Like in some of the Horus Heresy books, it kind of gets showcased like that. They really did have a good amount of autonomy. It was not small by any means, but obviously they still had to have their responsibilities, and it obviously is worth noting as it became problems later that, this is also the period in which the Imperium kind of really placed all the tech eggs in the Mechanicum basket. But within this period, as the Mechanicum, as I denoted, were busy doing their own things, they needed to still be able to provide support to the Great Crusade in many ways, but more, especially at the time, given that the main fighting force through the Great Crusade were the Space Marines, because there was an Imperial army, but as far as I've ever known and been told, their primary aspect was more of the defense, right? Space Marines would show up, conquer, leave an army, go, right? So they had to be moving a lot, but that means they also had many, especially when they had a lot of tech, a lot of vehicles, and a lot of, and a lot of things that can go wrong. So in order not to have to dedicate a tech priest for them, all the time, basically, and permanently, they instead chose to train certain Marines to essentially do their support job. So what is true then as it is now, the Marine trains on Mars and effectively and fully integrate with a machine cult. Now this could be very dependent on just where they get sent to, right? Maybe it could have realms of, hey, you're with the Iron Hands, you'll probably fit with this group. Hey, you're a Space Wolf, you'll probably fit better with this group, right? Or they don't care. They could go anyway. And now then through their training process, which in many regards can vary, but they will essentially spend the course of 30 years. And in that, then they will attain the badge of the Machina Opus, which, as far as I know, is, well, we've seen the image frequently with it's like the Mechanicum, I guess technically now it's just Mechanicus. Trying to find a good one here for you. There's it's kind of the skull gear with that often maybe is either white and black or has like the part machine, part skull
Oh, wow. Yeah.
aspect to it. Oh, this was the one I even planned on using. Um, and they will emblazon that on both their chest plate and on one of the pauldrons, and then the other will have their original chapter color. But
okay.
When they go into the training, they are trained within what is called the Auxilia Technologica Astartes. And this is specifically a body within the Mechanicus. So this is now, which is dedicated to the training of Techmarines. And it is after this 30 years that they then finish training and return to their chapter.
So what happens? They've dedicated 30 years to that training.
Well, so
they return back to their chapter. Do they immediately just get assigned? Like, how did things go from there?
Well, so within I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that they get. Well, so the ways that because some of the ways that they get sent out they may be looked at on the Mechanicus side will depend on some of the things that they get through their training. So, for example, one may find themselves more distinguished to the eyes of the Mechanicus leaders they are training under if they, essentially find themselves in some way benefiting the machine cult they are part of. So whether this is, providing a greater understanding of the ancient technological secrets of man, this could, which could include like recovering or activating some piece of archaeotech, or, pressing into, further understandings of the things that they already know. Now, obviously, remember, this is not finding anything new other than like if it was an STC, but
okay.
So they're not inventing anything, but the idea of understanding maybe what they know of an STC better, or, being able to, again, work the ideas of the machine cult forward.
Yeah, certainly.
Now, as they do make it back. Now, granted, I also should make the note here: novitiates that are learning in the, I don't know why I put this at the bottom. The Auxilia Technologica are Techmarine novitiates, kind of a standard term. We've seen the novitiates as a term for junior sisters. This is just Techmarines who are undergoing training, but they also do, when they are, if say they go through some of this process, but still they feel that they have more to prove, they may still be labeled as a Techmarine novitiate upon returning. And one of the first jobs that they do for their chapter is to pilot Space Marine tanks and aircraft.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Obviously, if you do, like, there are scenarios where, like, if you do very well, you maybe could skip this step, but like for most of them, they will start here. They will start as a novitiate. And then from that, they will start to kind of build themselves more in terms of to where, like, it's kind of like other segments like the librarians of Space Marine chapters and even chaplains, where this is like a segment, and apothecaries as well, where it's just like a special type of class within the Space Marines. And so there are many Techmarines in each chapter. This is not a scenario where, like, there's only one in each, there's only one in each company, or there's one per whatever. It's just kind of for every, it's probably a scenario where, like, for every 20 Space Marines, there is one Techmarine. I don't think that math is correct, but it's roughly about the idea.
Is it considered like if they're starting off in some cases as like these pilots or operating vehicles like this, is that considered like a lesser role to be taking? Like it sounds like they're kind of working their way up from that point. Like it's kind of like the bottom of the barrel in terms of like the role they could be taking in battle.
Yes, but I mean that is part of it being called novitiate, right? They are treated as a junior Techmarine, but a big portion of this is kind of, when you go from, say, like a Space Marine scout to getting all of the implants in and becoming a full-fledged Space Marine, most of those Marines will start at the lowest portion of any company, right? They will be, they'll likely show up into, fifth companies. They're just, and especially like a lot of them will be assault Marines where they have to run in very fast. That's essentially like the least safe job as a Space Marine, but to prove your mettle. So for a Techmarine, they start at a novitiate level and thus have to, kind of earn their lumps. But in this case, it's through piloting a tank or piloting an aircraft, right? However, there is a bit of a duality when it comes to being a Techmarine. So the reality is that Techmarines are pledging their allegiance to both the Cult Mechanicus and their chapter. This kind of makes them seem as an oddity to their brothers. Sometimes because you remember the cutscene in Space Marine 2, right? Where like they act like they're worried about, like his subordinates are worried about Titus, and he's like, is something bothering you? And he's like, no, it's nothing for you to worry about. And he kind of is like, is it us? And he's like, only if you worship the machine god or whatever.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, okay, yeah, fuck those guys. Like that kind of vitriol passes on to their Techmarine brothers, right? Because, it's not to the full extent, but like the honor of wearing the Machina Opus also showcases the fact that they have gone through and will receive some respect and aid from a machine cult, and in many regards will be treated as one of their own, whether or not that be, a scenario where maybe they do it begrudgingly or all of them feel that way, or other Mechanicus will feel that way. But that machine cult may very well be more, likely to want to work with you or help you. But another big aspect is, the general thing is that Techmarines wear this red armor, this primary red armor that is the same color of the robes of the Mechanicus.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And it doesn't help that in the time that all of these Space Marines are taking their essentially formative years of being a Space Marine, these ones are gone, having spent decades away from their chapter for this training. And thus it makes it harder for them to kind of be looked at as one of their own as fully. And thus they'll be kind of almost pushed away. But in some regards, they also push themselves away too, right? Because, they're pledged both by blood and to the chapter. Sorry, they are pledged by blood to both the chapter, but then by body and mind to the Omnissiah. And so, they are still held in great respect and esteem. Like, hey, I respect you for what you're doing because without you, our tank doesn't work. But they may still be looked at it as, what are you doing? Or you weirdo, just fix the tank. Stop talking all this tech nonsense. Fix the tank.
Stop talking to the tank and fix it.
Yeah, exactly. So, and the thing is, as I was kind of alluding to, that does extend, unfortunately, also to the Mechanicus. So, like I said, their machine cult that they trained with may have great reverence for that Marine. If they were to look at or talk to another adept of Mars that especially has nothing to do with that machine cult, they will look at them as incomplete. Like, because many Mechanicus members look at Techmarines as like, well, you're like us. Mm-hmm. And again, I can kind of respect that. But at the same time, you did not complete your training. You are not a full-fledged tech priest. And that's kind of looked at as like you're like, you're like half of us, And thus that's why they kind of end up varying in a little bit of kind of like a semi-sad, isolated life, They're slightly ostracized by their brothers, but also those who are the allies of which of those who they trained with, who they learned everything with. Now, as far as I know, given that this stems from official art, it is definitely not always a scenario that a Techmarine always seems to wear the red of Mars, as like I mentioned, these are multiple art, like a Games Workshop art pieces that show a Techmarine not wearing red.
Mm-hmm.
But it does, it does. Those ones are likely the ones that have maybe had a little bit more integration, but the biggest point to that is like the last picture I sent you there, which is like members of the Iron Hands, who, because of them being who they are and essentially just being all about machines, replacing, basically like being Techmarine, the chapter, there's a little bit more that issue of brotherhood, way less of a problem.
Oh yeah, certainly.
Because they're way more into it. They're like, yo, brother, hook me up.
Mm-hmm.
And through that, then Techmarines though can still climb a ladder and one day potentially may find themselves move all the way up to the top of the ladder, being the master of the forge. They are treated pretty much about, even as Mars, as close to a tech priest as you can get. So at least like if you say, I'm the master, I am, master of the forge, for the Ultramarines, if to a Mechanicus member, a tech priest will be like, okay, yeah, we could talk. You'll get that just bit more respect, which is honestly better than even that. But especially in their chapters, end up being a little bit more isolationist, kind of for two reasons. A, they're very busy. They're in charge of all Techmarines, which means that they are basically in charge of all tech for the chapter. Because like this is a master of a forge is not, company based. This is chapter. So there is only one. So they got a lot to keep track of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, so that kind of makes them a little bit more isolationist. Obviously, they're also just nerdier. So people aren't as interested to talk to them. Again, except for maybe Iron Hands, but Iron Hands have a bit of a special other thing with that too. So we'll get to that later. But let's kind of talk about some of the things that are honestly one of the most apparent aspects of the Techmarine, which is the stuff you see on them all the time, everywhere. So a Techmarine's power armor is modified to accommodate not only just like normal cyber enhancements, but the backpack, which is upgraded to have, oh, where did I put it? Oh, shoot. I don't think I put the actual name. Oh, it's not like a named thing. It's just, okay. Sorry. So the armor's backpack, or like, like the power pack you usually see on the back of a normal Marine, it has a servo harness on it, which is what has all those, mechanedrites, servo arms. Honestly, just about anything you could need when it comes to essentially giving yourself extra hands.
I was going to say, it seems to be very appendage based.
Yes. As I denoted, their armor generally bears the rust red colors of the Adeptus Mechanicus, but the chapter badge is always displayed on one shoulder guard, and then the badge on the other. The Machina Opus.
Right.
So however, the servo harness can have not only just the arms, but it can have forge bolters, so just extra weapon, which is featured in Space Marine 2 with the Techmarine class. Also with plasma cutters or flamers. Usually, though, again, those will be about the size of like hand flamers usually. Though I'm sure there's one out there that has a normal sized flamer on it. However, Techmarines also make use of cyber familiars in their retinue. Now they will often be found with various servitors, but these cyber familiars are essentially a catch-all term for a variety of things that are semi-autonomous. So this is like servo skulls, mech spiders, and just drone units with kind of just like a lesser connection, but are tied to the direct neural control of the Techmarine controlling them. Otherwise, their usual weapon is the classic, but ever so cool Omnissiah axe.
Okay. I'm interested.
Yeah, I mean, you'll see this on the mechanic, like the tech priests will use these quite frequently. But they're just so cool. Yeah. I just think like it's such a cool weapon to me. Mm-hmm. Also like using it in like Rogue Trader with the tech priest is like so good because it's just got that like really solid, just like boom, like when it hits anything. It's just like very, and then so far playing with it in Space Marine 2, it's a similar feeling. Like every time especially if you heavy strike with it, you just like it echoes onto the ground. If you click and hold your heavy strike, it like creates a electric shockwave out from it when you release it. Yeah, it's cool. Otherwise, yes. So other chapters have kind of variations on the Techmarine. So Grey Knights, for example, they're just called Techmarines, but they are, these warrior smiths within the ranks of the Grey Knights. So when they return to Titan, a Techmarine, is the Techmarine will have to kind of go through, because they start as these Space Marines and then they get picked, right? The Mechanicus doesn't find someone and turn them into a Space Marine, right? And then a Techmarine. They see these Space Marines running around as these scouts, right? These initiates. And they're like, you seem to have good favor with these machines. You seem to be good at tech. Come on down.
You're okay. Get in. Yeah.
Yep.
For sure.
So they have, but in the Grey Knights, they have been working on this culture of, fighting demons, defeat chaos, screw chaos. And now they have these new traditions and rituals from the priests of Mars. And very few of these doctrines are generally compatible with the rest of the Grey Knights. So part of it ends up, one of the funky parts end up being that these Techmarines are expected to modify and improve their war gear in order to better fight the demons. But there's a key factor in that: improve their war gear. Remember, the mechanics do not like to improve. They don't like to fix. They don't like to move things forward. But the Grey Knights are like, we need shit that's got to adapt. We got to find
we
new
need
stuff.
it to be better and better and better. Yeah.
Because these demons just figure the shit out, or something, or they find a new demon, it's like, because the idea of what these demons could be is truly infinite. So, they kind of have to fight against much of their Techmarine instinct. But they do so anyway, because one way or the other, they are beholden to their chapter, and the chapter is the one that they are facing every day, right? They don't get to just go back to Mars and be like, they didn't like that I followed our rules. They kicked me out.
They said I had to be even better, and I didn't want to.
They're gonna be like, that's our shit. Get back there. We don't want you here. So they do it because whether it be begrudgingly or lightly or finding ways around it, they are still loyal in large part to their chapter, and the Grey Knights are no exception to that aspect. Especially because many Techmarines generally acknowledge why, right? The importance of the why here. They acknowledge they are not Ultramarines, right? They are fighting a very different battle. And thus, if they were a part of the Salamanders, maybe they could have stuck to their doctrina, but they've got bigger fish to fry right now. Otherwise, with the Iron Warriors, you have the Iron Father, which I believe I already sent you in the Terminator armor there picture.
Yep. Iron Daddy. I see him.
So Iron Father is not the name of just every Techmarine. That is, I don't want to insinuate that, right?
Sure.
Iron Father is a rank within the Iron Hands chapter, and it is essentially combining those of a chaplain and a Techmarine. And thus, basically anybody can become an Iron Father. However, many Iron Fathers have once been Techmarines, and with how Techmarines are held in such high regards, it is not uncommon for a Techmarine to also then gain chaplainship and become this Iron Father as a result, right? Like, they're so tightly knit, it is not surprising for them to have essentially gained so much standing that they're like, well, chaplain and Techmarine kind of samey for us sometimes, so you're kind of both, so let's just fit you together. The roles work nicely for us. However, originally, the Iron Father during the Great Crusade were not members of the Legion at all. They were generally these engineer mystics who maintained Dark Age Providence machinery on Medusa. But it obviously, as time goes on and the Imperium becomes generally more theological, whichever one of those words is the correct one. The idea of, this role having more weight to it, especially from a kind of almost religious and sentimental value, especially with how the Iron Hands became more infatuated with the Omnissiah, with the machine spirit, just with the machine in general. It just kind of willingly adapted. And then finally, I want to talk about the Iron Priests of the Space Wolves. because they're like a Techmarine, but just with a couple extra things that they get to deal with.
Fun.
So their origin actually generally ends up a little bit differently too. You know, a gifted young Fenrisian smith may make a pilgrimage to the Isle of Iron, where they meet with the living gods of Fenris. That's a whole thing we're going to talk about in a Space Marine episode or Space Wolves episode someday, because that's a bit of a, like, one of those, the Space Wolves in many regards are like very clearly towing the line when it comes to a lot of the rules, even since the Great Crusade. But, you know, the Emperor loved Lehman Russ. So, and not actually, he just liked using Lehman Russ, therefore got the pass.
he loved what Lehman Russ could do for him.
Exactly. Because truly the Emperor didn't really love any of his sons except for maybe Sanguinius. Probably Horus to some extent too, but none of it was like a very like hyper paternal, and it was way more of just like a respect. But that's a whole different conversation.
Yeah, totally.
So from this, when the pilgrims go to the mountain and pass the test of the Iron Gauntlet, they then may become an apprentice and be initiated into the Space Wolves. So they kind of essentially have a bit more of an early, you are becoming a space or a Techmarine from the jump kind of motive, like way of going to it. Now, one of the extraditions for every Techmarine or Iron Priest in this scenario is that they have to tend to the spirits of dreadnoughts and the depths of the Fang, and it is their duty to rouse them from their deep slumbers if they are needed in battle. Now, this is not seclusive to the Space Wolves, as pretty much it will always be Techmarines that are dealing with and caring for the dreadnoughts of every chapter. But usually it is like specifically ones of higher stature, right? It's for the top. Where in the Space Wolves, this seems to imply that it is a little bit more ubiquitous of a duty amongst their Techmarines. Though obviously there is definitely some dreadnoughts that are treated with a little bit more reverence than others. Why am I blanking? I've done it again. I'm doing the thing where I'm totally blanking on his name. No. Bjorn Fellhammer.
Bjorn, okay.
The oldest dreadnought literally was there with the Emperor, still around, and still can get into a fight if he needs to as a dreadnought. As a dreadnought, I should note. And it's, side note, it's so funny with Bjorn because like he'll like say to people like, I talked to the Emperor. I knew him. I knew the Emperor. And they'll like kneel and like bow in reverence and all that. And he's just like, oh my fucking God, stop. Please don't do that. There are so many. He's like, I can't say them now, but there are so many reasons why you shouldn't be doing that. You know, because it's like Gilliman, where it's like look, man, if I told you half of the shit that my dad did, you'd hate him. but we were loyal nonetheless. That's why we stuck around. But like, I acknowledge my dad is an asshole.
Yeah.
And I think Bjorn had a very similar thing too, which is very funny. However, following the return of a new Iron Priest to Fenris, they will take a final test where they will place his right hand into lava as a sacrifice to the spirit of the Iron Wolf.
Whoa.
And then to conclude this rite, his hand is then replaced by a bionic replacement, and thus his induction into Iron Priesthood is complete. That's why.
Okay.
Now, I did skip this earlier, but this is a good time to bring it up. I don't know why I skipped this. Huh. But anyway, you'll notice that this Iron Priest picture I gave, because it's a little tougher to tell because of the extra Death Watch gauntlet, but you can see that this Iron Priest is from Death Watch.
Mm-hmm.
And, in all the, as we kind of denoted, like between normal Techmarines in most chapters and some of these variants, there is one place that a Techmarine is almost always valued. And that is in the Death Watch.
I feel like that makes sense, honestly.
Yeah, the biggest reason, honestly, being that, when, especially like when an army or a chapter is at war with whatever, they're not going to send a lot of Techmarines into the battle. They're not going to send, whatever Techmarines they have available, because maybe that's like 2, 3, for the whole force. They don't really, that's all that they have though for repairing their vehicles. So they don't want to lose that. So they'll probably keep them back. They'll probably make sure that they stay by the, command ship, a vehicle bay, wherever, and be like, sorry, I know you want to take this out into battle or whatever, but we need you here. All we otherwise have are novitiates, and they got a pilot. So it's kind of like, well. In the Death Watch, however, you become essentially one of the more invaluable members of a kill team. This often generally because of kind of two main reasons. When having a Techmarine next to you means that you are effectively with some form of power, of technological powerhouse, right? Like we mentioned that they can carry an extra weapon through some of their mechadendroids sometimes. Just even having sometimes those kind of pincers and claws can be very helpful for getting around and moving through the often tight corridors that the Death Watch deal with. The other reason then is thus their strategy and analysis in a fight. They can learn very quickly, like, I detect this many people, this many things, or the power is in this sort of state. We need to leave. We need to go. This is a bad idea. This is good. They're very good at dealing with that, and in a kill team, when there's only maybe 5 of you, that's the difference between life and death in most cases, And then especially giving the Death Watch's penchant for wanting to play with and use alien weaponry, a Techmarine can also be quite useful. Because even though the Mechanicus love to say that they have no idea how to use any type of alien weaponry, especially not Necron weaponry, they would never look into that ever. There's definitely not certain Mechanicus members in high profile storylines that definitely weren't so obsessed with, their love for learning about Necron technology that they basically betrayed the Imperium and worshipped a Catan. Definitely no way that's ever happened.
Feels like a weirdly specific example, but okay, I'll go along with it.
So yeah, from that, they can be very useful in the upkeep of those weapons, right? Like being able to carry, your fun Necron sword, or, the fact that you decided you were going to carry like a Tau rifle with you. The Techmarine can help with that. And, part of it is, again, it's a culture thing. When you're in the Death Watch, a lot of things are a little bit lighter. And so like maybe you're not maybe going to hold to that code, and, kind of living in the gray area is kind of normal for a Death Watch idea. So the Techmarine sometimes having to live in a gray area in general, it's a lot more comfortable. And I mean, realistically, part of being in Death Watch is kind of that at some point, many Marines may very well feel outcasted, and, or at least just like they don't know anybody around them. They're not, it's the idea of like, well, I didn't really grow up with you guys, so I don't know. Are we cool? Like what's going on? And so for Techmarines, it's kind of a nice thing, because it's like they generally felt that way in general. But now that everybody feels that way, it's way easier to kind of be like, no, let's talk.
Yeah,
like
I get you.
We're cool. No, we can be cool. And so, and then similarly, again, it goes both ways. Somebody else can look at the Techmarine and say like, no. Like I think what you do is pretty sick, and it's way helpful for you to be here. So we're happy to have you, often in charge. Like Techmarines and dreadnoughts are very common. However, another very commonly associated, especially if you have played Dawn of War, especially Dawn of War 2, you are likely very aware of the tarantula sentry gun, or the tarantula missile battery, which are essentially similar things, but one has missiles, one has bolters on them. But these are often seen side by side with a Techmarine, working on them. Similarly, when you play a Techmarine in Space Marine 2, you essentially go around the map, and at various points, usually where there's some type of likely horde that'll show up, there's a tarantula turret, and you as the Techmarine, you get your Mechadendroid down on it, you start working on it, get it booted up, and then bam, you got a turret available to help you and your boys.
Right.
Those are the two that I say are like the most just like notably common, because realistically they pilot then every other flying vehicle that the Space Marines have. They can pilot any tank.
Can I ask a silly question?
Absolutely.
You mentioned that the Techmarines, they'll be working, like they're doing maintenance on these turrets while they're out on the field.
Mm-hmm.
How much does that actually entail? Like, to what degree are they able to repair or like do maintenance on these turrets on the fly?
I mean, pretty much they can take care of.
Is it like an engineer in TF2 where they're just like slapping it with a wrench and it's magically repairing? Like, I'm curious just about like the degree to which a Techmarine is able to like do these repairs.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, in general, it's going to be to the level that they're going to see any type of like concussive damage or whatever in a battlefield, right? Like, if the whole sentry turret explodes, they're not just building a new one on the map, but like, if either if a bolter was blasted off and they need to reattach it, or they need to deal with wiring or ammo, between them and their like servo familiars and helpers, or just even servitors that are with them, they can get them repaired and back in working order.
Gotcha. Okay.
Otherwise, honestly, that's about it for the Techmarine. They're kind of they're kind of a little bit of a black sheep amongst most chapters, but they are such an important job that they
to them though because of that.
I love the Techmarine. I mean, I always loved the Techmarine in Dawn of War 2, as I mentioned. I loved putting down just sentry turret after sentry turret. They were such a cop out. The sentry turrets were such a cop out for like a bad strategy because you're like, oh no, I sent too many people out to take points. They're coming from my base. Sentry turret, buy me time. And when you had the Techmarine hero, that was easy because you could constantly repair them. You could keep them around.
Yeah.
And then therefore they were still great also for forward deployments. Hey, I'm trying to take this base. I'm going to place down 2 sentry turrets or tarantula turrets, make it way harder for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it is like you were saying, it is endearing that they kind of have to go through this like black sheepness, but it's kind of almost just as self-fulfilled, right, as it is placed upon them. Like, it's not like every Techmarine tries to make friends and everyone hates them.
I just find, and like we had definitely scratched on this when we were talking about the Adeptus Mechanicus, but just that like that interesting balancing act for anyone that is involved with the Omnissiah and then is also serving under the Emperor, that strained relationship that's there is, I found it really interesting when we were talking about the Adeptus, and I still do now. I think it's like a really, I feel like there's not a lot of other like relationships like that among the like Space Marine chapters that have this really interesting tension to them.
I think the only other one that definitely has that would be the Librarian.
Yeah.
Which, Psychers, Psychers, the Imperium, it's kind of like a whole, especially if you're not a Grey Knight.
Yeah.
Which, if you know about them, now you know nothing because your head's been blown off. I think the fun part about this kind of niche scenario, right? Because like, a lot of apothecaries still get plenty of respect because they're medics and they protect the gene seed. But, they still get a little bit of like, treated kind of, sometimes they still get treated like, well, you're just an apothecary. Not as much of a fighter,
yeah, totally.
And then, librarians, it's like, well, you're a psyker. You could just become a weird, gross tentacle creature in 5 seconds. And, half of us are going to be dead because of it. Essentially like this librarian could just turn into the squid creature from The Mist, rip a dude in half. And then, which is a real party killer when it comes to the Space Marine convoys.
Uh-huh.
And then otherwise, but like the chaplains, I think are that like exception to the rule where they're very well respected by their peers and they are looked at very positively amongst most of anybody in the Imperium. And of course, that has everything to do with the fact that it's because their shtick is that they love the Emperor. So, that gets you big points.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's pretty much all I got when it comes to the Techmarine. This whole time I've probably enjoyed
new Techmarine miniatures.
The one that
in the next year or two.
The one that I posted at the beginning of this is pretty new. Like, it's pretty relevant. I don't know what year that came out. But I might be able to find that answer here actually shortly. Yeah, that came out in 9th edition. So that would have been, I think, 9th
that's
edition.
fairly new, yeah.
Yeah, 9th edition, I think it started in 2020. So, and it would have been during that. I think it might have been a launch. I mean, granted, it would make sense to launch a Techmarine with the, addition of 40K that the opposing army is Necrons. But
sure. Yeah.
I don't know when in the edition it necessarily launched, but it's still pretty new. Looks like July. It looks like it was launched because it was July of 2020. So that would have been near the launch then, because usually the edition launches in the summer, which is why we're waiting for that announcement during Adepticon.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go. Yeah, so that I don't expect a new model per se. There could always, though, be other ones. Like, I think actually, for example, let me look quickly. But I believe there was an Iron Father. There was an Iron Father release this last year. Let me check. Iron Hands. Yes, there was Iron Father Pharaohs. That should just be how you say that. That is a new, technically Techmarine model that you could use as a generic Techmarine or as an Iron Father. It's up to you. But that is at least technically, that is a Techmarine still. But I would expect things like this,
Yeah.
Otherwise, any other questions about what we got going on with the Techmarines?
No, they're pretty straightforward. Really cool.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, next week, I've been sitting on this kind of thought, but I'm thinking what we'll end up talking about, because next week when this episode launches, we may do one of a couple things. I don't know. We're in a weird space right now. So it will be Adepticon. If they do in fact announce 11th edition, right? That means there's a lot to talk about. Like,
certainly,
once a new edition gets announced, you basically there is potentially basically like you could do just 6 weeks worth of content just from a announcement of a new edition alone before they even say what else is coming out with it. Because of that, we're kind of in this weird position of we're probably going to talk about a lot of what happened during those announcements. However, if somehow we are just all our whole community has just read the room wrong and they don't announce 11th edition at Adepticon, right? Then it'll be something else. And, I'll sort it from there. We'll get through it. We'll talk
hit
about
hit
something.
an emergency button.
Yeah. We'll talk about something else, but if it goes as planned, there will be an 11th edition episode, but otherwise that's what we're expecting. And that's what I'm hoping for with these last, end of edition, books that have just come out with the 500 worlds, the Maelstrom, and then what will be the Reign of Iron to end it off on. There's been some interesting lore tidbits. And starting a new edition, you at least usually get a little bit of something, And that'll be a great time too from that to kind of really like set everything into place, you know? Otherwise, until then, we will see you next time for whichever episode that may be.
Maybe I'll come back and I'll have we won't have 11th edition, but I will have a third metal appendage that I use to podcast better.
Ooh. It has
like
the microphone.
Like it can
in
hold my microphone up instead of using
it just is the mic. You have a boom
the mic
arm.
stand. Yeah.
Yeah, your third arm, your appendage is a boom arm.
Yes.
All right, until next time.
Announce that, Adepticon. Goodbye.